And when you were in law school, what did you do during the summers, or where did you work as a law student?
Had, almost by my first summer internship was with legal aid in North Carolina. And it was actually, they never accepted first year students, but I met with them and I kept calling them and calling them. And they ended up offering the job to someone else. And they said, well, we offered the job to someone else and she has 10 days to accept. So I called back on day 10 to see did she accept. And they said, she hadn't accepted yet, but you know what? We like the fact that you did that. So I got my first internship by basically begging. But it worked out well. I've had an ongoing relationship with legal aid over 15 years now. And so that was actually a wonderful thing. My second summer, I worked at a civil rights firm in Charlotte. At the time, Julius Chambers was alive, and he was the former chancellor of our university. And he had a tremendous record. He actually had a perfect record before the U.S. Supreme Court. Every case he argued there, he won. He was a former director of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And so I worked under him for a summer as well before I graduated.
Oh, that's amazing that you got to work with him. Yeah, that's great. And did you end up working for legal aid after law school?
Yes, after law school, legal aid offered me a job doing law school to come work there, and they had what's called a foreclosure defense project. And so for a couple of years, me and another team of lawyers, we defended people who were facing foreclosure. And if you know anything about mortgages, as far as the history is concerned, this was back in '04. This was that time of bubble bursting. If that's what we refer back to that time now as when the bubble burst. And so this is when middle income people were losing their homes in foreclosure. Foreclosure used to be just a poor person's problem. But back then there were so many illegal mortgages, a lot of people were losing their homes in foreclosure. And so we defended them in various ways, sued lenders, filed bankruptcies, et cetera, et cetera. And so we did that. And if a student has an option about how they start their career, that would have been probably the best thing I could have done, because I worked on a team of people, of attorneys who averaged 20 years of experience, and they took the time to teach me stuff. And so that was invaluable. And some of the things that I know today is because I was able to sit in their office and they would break it down for me. And so that's something that I think sometimes is missing in the way that some of our newer lawyers have to start their careers. But for at least a year, I didn't write a letter without an attorney looking at it and approving it and telling me what to change about it. Now, granted, in the moment, I probably didn't like that. One time, I think I wrote a letter and it said, "Dear whoever it was," and I started, "I hope you're doing well." And my supervising attorney was from New Jersey, and she said, "We don't say that to people. That's a Southern thing to say." And so she made me take that out of my letter because she didn't want to say to the opposing counsel that she hoped they were doing well.
Oh, jeez.
But the point is that I was able to benefit from their tutelage, and you never lose the benefit of that. I learned how to do bankruptcy because an attorney sat me down at her desk and walked me through a bankruptcy petition for 2 days. It took that long to go through the petition. And to this day, I can file a bankruptcy like nobody's business. But that was because someone took that much time with me to explain how to do that. And that's kind of really years later why I started a CLE company, because I wanted that experience for newer attorneys, because I know what it meant for me to have that. And it's not as, you can't reach out to an attorney in private practice and say, "Hey, Judy, could you spend 2 days of your life explaining to me how to do this?" That's not appropriate because Judy is busy. Judy has clients and things and obligations. And so she literally can't do that, but it still doesn't change the fact that attorneys need that experience. And so that was kind of the vision of the CLEs, was literally just to give attorneys that same experience I had, where somebody could just stand there and tell you how to do stuff. And I know, because as a law professor, I know that there are times that we don't tell students how to do stuff. You will take family law and not necessarily learn how to prepare documents as far as a divorce is concerned.
Yeah,
Now,
that's
a
so
lot
true.
of students, right, sometimes students will complain that that's not right. But the truth of the matter is, law school is 3 years. And if we added a lot more of the practical application, law school will be 4 years. And I don't think, no one wants that. And so we had to pick and choose. We only can make you take 90 hours to get a law degree. So we have to pick and choose what we're going to teach you. And so it's not a mistake that you might take a family law class and not learn how to do the divorce completing, or you'll take civil procedure and never see a summons, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about in the class, but I've never saw a summons until I graduated, right?
Yeah,
But I
that's so true. Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
but you'll graduate and you'll need to know how to prepare a summons. And so I do a 30-minute session on a CLE. This is what the parts of the summons mean.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people appreciate that because no one knew what the parts of the summons meant. I remember, like, we talked about the issuance of a summons. And in my third year class, I would ask the students, do you all know what it means? Like, what actually happens when a summons is issued? And no one knows what that means, because all they know is that you have 5 days to do it, because that's what the rule says. But they don't know who does it, how does that happen. They don't realize it's a clerk actually signing their name to the document. Never knew that, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I definitely would like to talk to you more about your CLE company, because that's something that very few people do. That's great. But getting back to legal aid, though, for any students that might be interested in working for legal aid, isn't it incredibly competitive to even get those attorney positions? Because I know some attorneys have actually made a whole career, like they don't quit, they stay on for many years.
Yeah, many attorneys on legal aid have been there for a career, and so that speaks well to their commitment. I can't say that it's necessarily competitive. What I can say is legal aid looks very closely to confirm that you are committed to their mission. That is very important to them. Perhaps that's what makes it, and I don't know if people know that when they apply for the job of legal aid. They are very concerned that you are committed to their mission. And if you can demonstrate that you are committed to their mission, and not with words, but you've done pro bono work, you've actually served that population and you are committed to doing that, you can do very well in a legal aid interview and have a good chance. But they know that their turnover rate for newer attorneys is very high if you're not committed to the work, because there is a trade-off. A legal aid job is going to pay slightly less than most firm jobs. So what keeps a person there? And the answer is commitment to the mission.
Yeah, and also, working for legal aid, does it just like pause your student loans or something like that? I mean, there's some sort of loan forgiveness there, right? If you work for legal aid.
It's a nonprofit, and so there are some programs available for people who work for nonprofits. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so maybe now you can tell us more about, what led you to found your own continuing legal education company, and how did you even know where to start to do that? I mean, because that just seems like such a bold thing to do. Everybody just normally takes CLEs from the Bar Association or like major corporations like MBI, for example. So how'd you do it?
Well, I remember this because I was in my office one day at the law school at NCCU, and 3 students had called me and asked me the exact same question. They were graduates. They had graduated years earlier, and they just had a question about how to do something. And I remember saying to a colleague, I said, I wish I could just get them all in a room and just answer all their questions at the same time. And then someone said to me, well, that's a CLE. And I thought, well, why don't I just put together the CLE? And so I did. I figured out the process to get it approved by the bar, and I hosted a CLE. But the funny thing is, I was doing this for my former students because I wanted them to come in a room and let me teach them that practical stuff that I didn't get a chance to teach them in law school. But for an entire year, not one of my former students took one of my courses, but other attorneys did. So for a year, I started doing CLEs, and these students that I was expecting to show up, not one of them showed up. But all these other attorneys showed up, so they liked it. And so we kept doing it. And so that's been 11 years now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible because I really like how you just make the CLE very kind of short and sweet and specific. And then you have people who actually know what they're doing. They break it down very, what do you call it? Like very simply for people to understand, because especially if you're a younger attorney, you have no idea, like, how do I even start this kind of case, or how do I make money off of it? What are the forms and stuff? So that's really great that your continuing legal ed classes offer that.
Well, thank you for that. We actually work with our attorneys because it depends on their experience teaching. Some of them think that a CLE is supposed to be a theoretical historical lesson because that's what they've been hearing. And so we actually have to work with our presenters to make sure that they realize that we don't want that. And sometimes we can't get certain presenters because they're only accustomed to talking about the theoretical history of law or something. And our company, and there's value in that. There is value in understanding that. That's simply not what we do. And so we actually started off with a lot of law professors, and we've actually geared now towards practitioners. So we have many more practitioners who are teaching our courses than faculty members, because traditionally faculty members teach CLEs, but it turned out that they were kind of the main ones who didn't really get into the nuts and bolts that we wanted them to get into. They would actually stay at a theoretical level because that's what they do for a living. And so now, and again, I'm not dismissing the value of that. I also teach on a theoretical level as well. But that's in law school. I teach that way to a class. Like my race in a law class, there is theory. Most of the course is about theory. So I'm not suggesting that there's no value in that. But I know the vision that I had, which is I wanted students to get the benefit of the way I was taught. I was taught by sitting at the feet of an attorney who had many years of experience, and they would just break it down, and break it down. And once they've done that, I can run from there. I mean, I never would have figured out how to file a bankruptcy the way that I know how to file a bankruptcy. But this is me at this point, it was like 16 years ago that this attorney sat down with me, but it wasn't, I've never forgotten it. I now I can look at I don't even need, there's this bankruptcy software. I don't need the software. I can do it by hand. It's like a 70-page, document to prepare the bankruptcy petition. But because of that experience, that I've never forgotten that. And that's what I wanted to share with the newer lawyers.
I see. And do you have any plans to expand your continuing legal ed company to do other states continuing legal ed classes, or is it just going to be North Carolina focused?
We actually have done some stuff in Florida, and we're now working on something called New Lawyer School. And so I hope that comes to fruition. The planning slowed down because of coronavirus, because this is something that has to be done in person. And so we're now only doing webcasts. And so New Lawyer School is a vision that we have of an intensive program for new lawyers to learn trial skills. And there's just no way to do it online, because we need them to break into small groups, and we need them to present oral opening arguments and cross-examinations. We need them to do that stuff in front of seasoned lawyers. And so I'm hoping that, and I'm sure the country will get back to normal, the world will get back to normal, and we'll be able to come and do these in-person things again. But that's the new thing that I'm looking forward to. And that's not geographically based in North Carolina, because there are new lawyers across the country who are just need to learn trial skills. There's a lot of people, as you know, who went to law school, didn't think they were going to be a trial lawyer, so they didn't take trial advocacy, they didn't take a clinic, and then they graduated from law school, and next thing they know, the firm that hired them says, hey, go to court, and they don't know how to do it. And so they need that training as well. So that's something that we're working towards.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. You have so many projects that are going on. Yeah. And so, oh, well, getting back to your book though. Okay. So you finished writing your book, and then how did you even get it published? Like, what company is it published through, and how can people buy it?
Well, I decided to self-publish this book. That may not be the case for the entire series, but I self-published the book partly because it gave me the ability to get it out at a price that wouldn't be prohibitive. When you self-publish, you actually can pick all the details yourself. I wrote a book a few years ago when I was at NCCU with a colleague called The Journey to Excellence in Legal Writing, and we used a traditional publisher. And the thing that I didn't like was I didn't have any control over the pricing. And in the end, honestly, I thought the book was very expensive, but I didn't control that. The publisher controlled that. And so if I wanted to give someone a free copy, I couldn't do that. And so for this book, it was about this story that I wanted to tell about for that new law student, and I wanted to be able to control those aspects. And so self-publishing gives you that flexibility. It's a little harder because you have to do all the stuff yourself. I mean, self-publishing. You have to figure out how to get the ISBN number. You have to get someone to design the book cover. And so you have to hire an editor to edit the book and to proofread. And so it puts more work on the author versus that first book. You know, I just sent the manuscript off and they edited it, they put it together, and next thing you know, I have a book in the mail. But I wanted to have more control over this book. And so for new authors, it is actually a pretty good way to get your information out to the community, because you control everything about it. It's just you have to work harder.
So, like, could you self-publish through a company like Amazon, for example? Or what are some?
Yeah, Amazon partnered with a company called KDP, which is a publishing house. And so that is actually what I'm using, KDP through Amazon. And so it gets your book on Amazon and it formats it for that, but it also allows you to get it's the Kindle version, but it's also the hard copy version as well that you can have published.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, hopefully I'll get a link to put up on the screen or on the video so that people can go directly and purchase it. How much is your book? Do you know how much they're selling it for?
We started off, it's actually 99 cents.
What? You mean for the electronic version?
Yeah, the electronic version, the ebook.
Oh, wow, that's very economical. Yeah, so everybody can get a copy of it then. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, how are you marketing your book? I mean, I guess there aren't too many bookstores around nowadays, huh?
Well, we're doing a big push to law school or pre-law groups, and so one of the things that we created was that we have a Facebook group. You're a part of our Law People USA group. We also have a pre-law group that we call Future Law People. And so we have a Future Law People group that a couple of hundred aspiring lawyers that are members of, and we communicate with them. And pre-law, we also have a database of pre-law advisors. And so those are the people who are connected to those who might go to law school. Because we had to be sort of strategic, because the market for this type of book is very, very small. It's only relevant for one small period of time, because it was written as a summer reading. And so because it has introductory stuff to contracts and property and towards and so procedure, but once you finish your first year of law school, then that information you don't need it anymore. So it's really very niche.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. It sounds like you have the right connections to get your book out. That way everybody can read it.
I hope so, and I appreciate you letting me talk about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Always interested in hearing from people who have been doing some really cool things. So, yeah. But on another topic, though, I mean, since you wound up in South Dakota, I mean, like, how ethnically diverse is it? And what's the school like? Like, do you feel like you're the only, like, African-American person there? Or are there a lot of Native Americans or something?
Well, it's certainly something that we have appreciated that we have to address. South Dakota is not a diverse state in general. And the other thing about South Dakota is it's sort of, I don't want to call it an oddball state, but people think about it that way. Like, you know how in the beginning you were asking if it was cold during the summer? Like, my family thinks that it snows here 24/7, 365 days a year, but it doesn't. We have really hot summers, actually beautiful summers. But yes, it gets very cold during the winter. I had to buy some different type of coats. But that was one day that it was negative 20 degrees, and so that was not pleasant.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think probably even with that type of number, it's the wind factor. That the wind was amazing. Like, that's why people have their faces covered. Because there's a moment where if your eye waters, it actually freezes on your face.
Oh, wow. So, like, you have to walk to your building, through that kind of blizzard?
But it's like 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
But that's why someone told me some good advice, which was your North Carolina winter coat was not going to work. And once I realized that was true, I was able to get a nicer coat, a different coat with layers, and that 30-second walk was okay. But my point in saying that is it's not as easy to get diverse people to come to South Dakota. That's what I'm saying. Probably, I want to say, I heard a statistic yesterday. I think 85% of our students come from this region. And South Dakota has less than 1% African American population, right?
Oh.
And so when 85% of the students come from the same area, by nature of math, you won't have many people who are of different ethnicities. Mm-hmm. And so what we actually acknowledge as something that we're working on. We do have the Black Law Students Association. We have the Native American Law Students Association at the law school. And we have a diversity panel coming up in September, and I'll send you the flyer for that, where we're basically having alums to talk about their experiences being at South Dakota and in an effort to sort of encourage other people to consider it, because it's not because we don't want people who are diverse to come. It's really a lot that deals with geographic type things that are just reality. But we can do better, because we actually started a diversity initiative at the law school specifically because if you don't intentionally engage in a process to seek minorities, you actually just aren't going to get in.
Yeah. And I mean, did you feel welcome to campus, or did you ever feel like people were kind of negative or racist towards you?
Well, actually, the funny thing is, the biggest difference that I saw was regional stuff. It wasn't race, it was Southern versus Midwestern. And I had to realize there was a way, for example, in the South, we are very open to speaking to strangers, When you walk past a stranger, you're waving and saying hello. And I lived in the South my whole life. And so I didn't necessarily appreciate that that's a Southern thing. And so when I moved to the Midwest, I would notice that people weren't doing that. And so it turns out it wasn't that they weren't doing it to me. They just weren't doing it in general because that's not what you do in the Midwest. It's more of an individualized feeling. Partly, again, geographically speaking, South Dakota is the most sparsely populated state in the country, which means people are accustomed to being by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's only about 1 million people in the entire state, and it is a very large state geographically. I live in the southern portion of South Dakota, and to get to the other side of South Dakota would take me 6 hours.
Oh, okay. I see.
And so it's just there's that culture there, but it wasn't about race. It was just about regional. And honestly, I had to figure that out because I didn't know why things were happening the way they were happening. And then when I began to meet more people and learn the culture, it was not race. It was Southern. I was expecting people to be Southern. And like even in my class, and this is something that I have difficulty getting over. When I walked into class at North Carolina Central, I would say good morning. And everyone would say good morning. I walked into class here and I would say good morning, and it would be complete silence.
Okay.
And it was
awkward.
And I didn't write. And I was caught off guard, like, why are they not saying anything? And so I actually asked them one day, like, what's going on with that? And they were like, we didn't know why you were saying that. Like to them, like professors here just walk into class and start teaching. And so, but in the South, that would be considered rude.
Yeah.
And so it was just a different thing. And so we now have an ongoing joke. I actually assign people to say good morning back to me because they don't naturally do that. But I naturally do it. And so to break the awkwardness, I end up picking 4 students to say, okay, when I come to class and I say good morning, you guys say it back.
Yeah, I see.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. But yeah, in terms of legal jobs around there, though, I mean, are there like big firms in South Dakota, or do most people wind up, spreading out and going to like some small firms or government agency type jobs?
One of the missions of the law school is there's an issue in South Dakota because there's a shortage of lawyers in rural areas. So that's one of our missions, is actually to address that. And so appreciating that the state is very big, but the population is not so big. You'll have areas of South Dakota where there's this one law firm for 50, 60 miles, right? And so what happens when that one lawyer retires? That one lawyer serviced the whole 60-mile radius. Or what about the fact that we both know that one lawyer doesn't practice every area of law?
Yeah.
So that one lawyer doesn't do Social Security disability,
Mm-hmm.
Then where do you go? You got to go 200 miles to the next lawyer who does Social Security disability. And so that's one of the concerns that our law school is seeking to address. We have a shortage of lawyers in rural areas, and there are metropolitan communities in South Dakota. So Sioux Falls is actually very metropolitan, and so you actually do have decent sized law firms there. You're not going to have a New York sized law firm here, but 50, 60 lawyers can be in a firm in South Dakota. And so you'll have a couple of big law firms, but the real concern is there are pockets of the state where there are just no lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to encourage our students to do that and to get to more rural areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like we talk about that too in North Carolina too, that, hey, there are plenty of these like far-flung, rural areas where there aren't that many attorneys. But another issue is, that do the young people actually want to be there and then have nobody to hang out with, or, are they going to be able to make any money if the people around there are all poor too? So there's there's like a lot of other factors as to why people don't want to go there to start up and hang up their shingle too. Yeah. But what about, you've ran for judge before also. Would you like to share a little bit about your experience of doing that? Because that sounds pretty interesting. Not a lot of people run for judge either.
Sure. It's always interesting because judges are oddly having to run for political office when it's not really a political position. And so it's an odd challenge that all candidates have to face, because if you ran for city council, for example, you could promise the constituents something. You could promise them that you'll fix their potholes or whatever, you know. You could promise them, vote for me and I will do this. When you run for judge, you can't do that. There's nothing to promise them other than I will make fair decisions. And we assume that everybody would do that. And so it's sort of odd because you're trying to stand out in an environment in which we're all just saying we're honest, good people, and we'd like to serve as judge. And so I did have some ideas about how to make the system more fair that judges can actually do, but there's also judges end up having to identify political parties when the truth is Democrat and Republican status really has nothing to do with what a district court judge does. And so that's something that the public should probably work to become more educated about. For example, people would ask me what my position was on abortion, you know, because I was running for district court judge. But that's because they don't know that that will never come up as a district court judge. When I ran, we had just passed that infamous bathroom bill, and people would want to know what my position was on the bathroom bill. Can you give me 1 second?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I had it on mute. Do you have a dog?
No, I was actually, I'm moving into a house, so I had some work going on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering what all that shuffling noise was in the background. So I thought you had a dog under your feet or something.
I was trying to find the quietest place, but I couldn't. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so we're talking about you running for district court judge. Where was that, in Robeson County?
Right, in Robeson County.
Okay. Yeah, so were you running against other people?
I guess. I was running against an incumbent. And so one of the things that happens in our state and most states, judges are often not challenged. It's a very interesting process. If you think about it, the public would probably be surprised if they truly understood the process, because the reality is when you run against a judge, if you don't win, you have to go back and appear before that judge. And so we hope that everyone is above reproach and has, you know, but we're also human beings. And so it's not personal, but then it feels personal, and it becomes awkward because for doing the campaign season, you're not allowed to appear before that judge. But after the campaign season is over, your cases go back before that judge that you ran.
That is awkward. Yeah.
It is. And generally that discourages people from running, because no one really wants to be in that position. You're building up a firm based on your ability to get stuff done. And if there's a public image, even if it's not true, that this judge doesn't want to be collaborative with you, then that doesn't help your firm grow. And so those are some concerns that we just have in general, you know. But campaigning actually wasn't bad. I'm a natural introvert, and so having to walk around and shake hands and do the Christmas parades and in the rural campaign, you do a church tour. So you basically go to all the churches and you stand up in the middle of service and you announce who you are. And so doing that for almost a year was a lot. But I also was able to meet really great people. And so actually, that was actually the best part of it was I was able to meet a lot of people that I never would have gotten to meet before. And in the end, um, I ran against a 20-year incumbent judge. And in the end, I got 40% of the vote. And so I actually was proud of that.
Yeah, that's actually really good, you know, against someone that had been there for so long. Yeah.
When I did the math, he had actually started serving as a judge when I was in high school.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And then to have to campaign for a whole year, that's just exhausting. I don't know. How did you run your own law practice while doing this at the same time? I mean, did you hire a campaign manager or something?
I did have, I had a small group of campaign workers. It is challenging. It's because part of it is you have to figure out how to begin to wind down your firm. Wow, because if you can't take certain cases while you're campaigning, because if you can't reasonably expect for the case to be over in a year, you can't take it. And so you're limited in the cases you can take for an entire year. So that can be a challenge as well. So unfortunately, the system that we currently have in our state is not in favor of doing what I did. It's actually a little, it's designed to discourage it. And so what you'll find is that most judges, once they get on the bench, they stay because they are no longer challenged. And there is some information, actual data that shows that can compare the two candidates. Like we as attorneys do a survey, and the survey, the statistics are placed together and we receive that information. So we're ranked by attorneys across the country as far as integrity, knowledge of law, that stuff that matters. And so that's information that you try to put out there to the community, but at the same time, it's in the backdrop of attorneys end up endorsing the incumbent. And so I have a survey that says I'm more qualified, but you have the attorneys who want to maintain good relationships with you and donating money to your campaign. It's a very interesting, like many states no longer doing this. It's very interesting the fact that local attorneys fund a judge's campaign. And we all know that happens, and it theoretically doesn't create conflicts of interest.
Yeah, that's right. It is kind of a weird system where you have to become like a politician to become a judge, and just spend so much time away from your practice and your money and everything just trying to get this judgeship. So, yeah. Well, do you have any parting words? I guess it's been a little bit over an hour now, but you have any other words of advice for law students or people thinking about going to law school?
Well, I really think that ultimately one of my life philosophies is that work works. And I say that all the time, and I believe that because it is your work ethic that will generally put you apart. I may not be the smartest or whatever, but I know I can work the hardest. I know that I can engage in a process that will give me a competitive advantage. And so students or whoever is considering any career, they need to decide that that's what they want. You make decisions by, this is my goal, and then you work to achieve the goal. You don't decide, I think law school is too hard, I'm not going to go. That's not how we make decisions in life. We actually decide what the goal is and work to achieve the goal. And so I would just encourage that. If it's their heart desire to actually become an attorney, then do what it takes to get there. That includes preparing for the LSAT. That includes one of the things that I don't think students know, a lot of people don't know, that is it's your undergraduate GPA that carries a lot of weight in a law school application. That actually means we consider your undergraduate GPA even if you got a master's degree. So if you just played around in college and graduated with a bad GPA and then went and got a master's, when we're calculating admissions for law school, we look at what we call UGPA, which is only your undergraduate GPA. So you can't throw away your undergraduate career partying and whatnot and then come back later. You have to take that seriously because it will follow you and it matters. And so I would love for more people to know that, because we see a lot of applicants who come back and say, but wait, I got a master's degree. That actually doesn't even get factored into the analysis. It is your undergraduate GPA. So they should know that. But I hope, yeah. So, but that's it.
Yeah, yeah.